And welcome back, my people. So now that we learned about our seeing and our eyeballs, now we got to talk about our ears, obviously, right? So now we are talking about hearing. So in your notes, if you can do a little squiggle, we are moving on to the hearing portion, okay? So when we talk about hearing, we have our vocab word of audition, which is a sense or act of hearing. Okay, sense or act of hearing in the psych world. That is what it means. And now what we're going to talk about is how do we sense and perceive energy in sound waves, right? So how do we collect the sounds that we hear and how does it kind of go into our brain and how do we understand it, right? So first, just we have to learn about the three properties of sound waves. Again, not musicians. I know my hearing's not the best when it comes to to playing music. I did not make the orchestra back in middle school because apparently my hearing was off. So I was a clarinetist, though. I was in band for my during fifth grade. But anyway, so we have frequency, which is it corresponds to our perception of pitch, right? So frequency, pitch. Frequency, pitch. I would highlight both. So frequency is when we look at our perception of pitch, okay? And the length of the sound wave is how we perceive pitch. So if we have low frequency, it's lower waves. The higher the frequency, the higher the waves, okay? We have amplitude, which corresponds to our perception of loudness. So if we think of amplitude, think volume. Amplitude, volume. So we had frequency, which talks about pitch. Amplitude is how we discriminate between high and low volume. Okay, high and low volume. And then there's complexity, which corresponds to our perception of timbre. And I think for all my musicians, let me know if I'm saying it right. I could be saying it wrong. So all my musicians out there, I'm sorry if I butchered the word. So and complexity is essentially how we perceive the sound quality or the resonance, right? So where like when I think of Adele, I think of like a simple pure tone. And then like if you've ever listened to rap, where there's a lot of beats going on while people are talking. And so it's like that's where the higher complexity comes, okay? All right, so sound waves. Hearing is about how sound waves and changes in the air pressure unfold over time. So remember, so think of a concert, right? There's a difference of what you hear when you're right next to the bass compared to you out in the parking lot, right? So sound waves change in air pressure over time. So as the sound waves travel, the air pressure changes around it, which is why we hear it less as we leave the concert, right? Amplitude, just like we talked about, the intensity of the amount of energy of the wave. So talking about the height of the wavelength, right, which talks about amplitude, which is our volume, and then frequency, right? So the rate of vibration. So if you guys ever, we're going to learn about what vibrates in our ear, but it's our eardrum. And so if you've ever been to a concert where you hear that ringing in your ears for days after, it's because you were very, very close to the vibrations of the original, of where the sound was coming. And it vibrates your eardrums for a long time after you leave the concert. And so that's why it's hard for you to hear people after you leave a concert. So that's why you tend to yell after a concert because your ears have just gone through torture for the last couple hours. We have decibels, which is the measurement unit for sound, which is dB. And then there's hertz for the measurement unit of frequency. That's how they measure it. We're not going to be needing to know any of the math. Just know that's how we measure it. Okay. So just so you can kind of put it into perspective, decibels wise, busy street corner is about 80. But if you ever go to a concert, it's going to be around 140. And if you are prolonged exposure over 85 decibels, it could produce hearing loss over time. So all my people who like to listen to Beats headphones or noise canceling headphones and just like have your music blaring, you might have hearing loss. Sometimes in class, I always there's a kid in the corner with their earbuds in and I can hear what they're listening to from like my side of the room. And I'm like, oh, you guys are going to go deaf. So anyway, protect your ears, okay? Protect your eardrums. So now for this next slide, it's going to be a massive slide, okay? So what I would like you guys to do is pause me right now, and I would like you guys to draw this ear. I know we don't need to be artists, so don't feel bad if your ear doesn't look the best, but please kind of just sketch it out. Make sure you draw like where the outer ear is, middle ear, inner ear. You're more than welcome to even take a screenshot of this and add it into your Google Notes or whatever notes you're taking, but please take a minute and just draw this. And then I will go through each stage. So I'll be in the camera until I have to be out of the camera. So the ear, this is our celebrity of the slide. We already went through our eyes, right? Our optic nerve is our translator, and our ear has its own translator to neural impulses, because remember, our spine only understands, our brain only speaks neural impulses, right? So how do we change those? So first we have to talk about the different parts of the ear. So we have the outer ear, which is where the sound is collective. So this outer ear, so if you've ever practiced like bat ears, you guys will be able to hear a lot more waves if you go like this. So your voice actually might sound louder if you go like this, according to just doing this. So that's why when I used to work at the children's school at Sonoma State, I always make them do bat ears to make sure they're all listening. But we're collecting more sounds, right, from our outer ear. The middle ear is where the sounds are amplified, right? So they're amplified through this little canal. And the inner ear is where the sound waves are transduced, or remember, our word could be translated. Okay, it's the translator, or transformed, right? So there's transduced, translator, and transform. They're all synonyms of each other. I always think of the transduce as a translator because it translates what the sound waves are to neural messages. Okay, so the inner ear is where all of that happens. Okay, so let's get ready to learn about each parts of these. Okay, so we have the first one, and it's called the pinna. The pinna, and that's the outer part of your ear. It's the visible outer ear on either side of your head, and it helps us pinpoint the location of sound. Okay, so there's a reason if Sally is talking to someone and she says your name and you look this way, because your right ear has already pinpointed which ear was stimulated, so it makes you turn that way. So that's how we can pinpoint who's talking in a classroom or in regular life. So we have the pinna. And down here, we have the auditory canal, okay? And let me let everything here hide. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. Hold on, my people. I should have my slide thing's in the way. So this is where, so in the auditory canal, this is where the sound travels to reach the eardrum. But remember, it starts to get amplified within the auditory canal. So if we look at this canal, it's getting more amplified as we go. Okay, so again, it's bringing the sound into the inner canal. The auditory canal is where it starts to vibrate, and it's going to lead us to right here, which is our eardrum. Okay, and our eardrum, here, let me get rid of the screen. It's our tightly stretched membrane right here that vibrates when it hits sound waves. So your eardrum is what vibrates when it vibrates every time every time a sound wave travels through the auditory canal, and it hits your eardrum first. So again, when you go to a concert, the buzzing that you have after is because your eardrum is still vibrating because the sound was that loud. We then have our ossicles. Our ossicles, these are the three bones in our ear. So the three bones, you don't need to know which one's which, but you do want to know what the three bones are. There's the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. And that picks up the eardrum vibrations and amplifies them. So there's even further amplification behind the eardrum, and then it's going to be passed along to the cochlea in the inner ear. So here's the cochlea, my people, and this is the most important celebrity, okay? The cochlea is the translator for the ear. The cochlea is the translator for the ear that translates to neural messages, okay? So here's the cochlea. It's going to go over the eardrum definition. So the cochlea is a coiled, bony filled tube which sound waves are transduced into neural impulses, okay? Right here, okay? So again, the cochlea is what is the one that transforms the auditory waves into neural impulses, okay? And then we have the semicircular canals. I know, okay, so here's the semicircular canals, and here's the definition for it. I don't know why it came up over here, just let's go with it. So these are the fluid-filled channels that help maintain balance by orientating the brain. So what this means is that if you guys have ever been in a spinny ride, right? It's the semicircular canals, which is on top of the cochlea, that has the liquid in it. So if you've ever been in a spinny ride that's been going right the whole time and you walk off and you fall towards the right, it's because your fluid in your ear is going that way. And that's why if you've ever seen a kid get spun on something and they just fall over, they fall over in the circle of which way they were going, because that's the way your fluid is going. It's like almost like a fluid in a toilet, right? How it all goes one way, right? So obviously you're going to go that way. So again, our ears are so important for our balance, which is why the cerebellum is right underneath the cochlea. Okay, so that's how they're all connected. And then we have, last but not least, we have our auditory nerve to the brain, right? So this is kind of like the optic nerve, right? So we have our cochlea, which is the translator, and then our auditory nerve is a bunch of nerve cell fibers connected, and they send the neural messages to the brain's thalamus, the sensory switchboard, and then they send it to the auditory cortex, which is how we understand what people are saying, right? Auditory and temporal. So again, the temporal lobe is in charge of hearing, right? And that's where our auditory cortex lies, and that's where we understand what people are saying, right? So again, remember the sensory switchboard is then sends it to where it needs to go, okay? Alrighty, so again, this is just another example of what you can draw or kind of look at. You're more than welcome to take another picture. I'll get out of the screen for a minute. There you go. You guys want to take a picture of it. Your activity for your video lecture will also include you putting these in back in order, okay? A few theories about hearing. Frequency theory states that the rate of neural impulses traveling to the auditory nerve matches the frequency of tone, thus enables us to sense pitch. So essentially what this theory is saying is that our nerve, our Nancy the neuron matches the frequency of the tone, which allows us then to understand the pitch. So with if we can understand the frequency of the tone, it will allow us to know pitch. Okay, so that's a theory that psychologists have, that tone and pitch are connected. There's also place theory, which I talked about, which suggests that the sound frequencies stimulated by the basilar membrane in specific places within our ear results in perceived pitch. So essentially the place theory is that it says that our basilar membrane, which is a part in our ear, allows us to perceive pitch, right? And again, we didn't get to watch the video, so ignore this little video quote at the bottom. And then hearing loss, something to know. These are just a few things that could happen with hearing loss. And this is our last slide. So conduction deafness, conduction deafness, okay, say that twice. Hearing loss caused by the damage to the mechanical system that is our cochlea. So essentially conduction deafness, somewhere there is a abnormalcy between the sound waves to the cochlea. So, you know, so this could be corrected through surgery or by hearing aids, so to help strengthen the sound waves to get to the cochlea, right? Because the cochlea is what transforms what we're hearing into neural messages, right? Because without it being transformed into neural messages or translated, we cannot understand it, right? And then we have sensory neural deafness, this is hearing loss caused by damage to the cochlea receptor cells. This is called nerve deafness. And if you damage your cochlea, it's not a good time, right? It's not a good time because that is your translator. So this is where deafness happens, right? Where they will have to learn sign language. A lot of people can read lips, but again, the cochlea is the most important part of our ear. It is the translator, okay? And with that, we'll finish off our last small video about the 5 senses, and then you'll be all done, my people. I hope you enjoyed hearing about our ears.